Welcome to the Council on Foreign Relations session with Tunisian President Marzouki. We all know that Tunisia has a long record of being a strategic country, one that we're watching closely as they go through a democratic transition. You have the president's biography in your program, so I won't go over it. Just suffice it to say his career has been spent in both public health and human rights advocacy. On the human rights side, some highlights are his role in helping form and then leading for a while the Tunisian League for Human Rights and also the African Network for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. He, as of the last couple of days, is a declared candidate for the elections in November. And so we have a lot of topics we want to cover with him today. I'm going to ask him to say a few words setting the stage, and then we will start with the questions, and then we will bring in your questions.
Well, good morning, and thank you for this introduction. I'd like to say that I'm always very happy to come here and to try to convince you that you can bet on Tunisia, because even if Tunisia is a small country, Tunisia is now playing an important role in the whole region. Because Tunisia could be the model that the whole Arab world is looking for. Probably many people, are asking me all the time, why is the outcome in Tunisia so different than in Syria? I think it's because of structural reasons, and not because we are better than Syrians or more moderate than Lebanese, but because there are some structural reasons for the outcome in Tunisia. You probably know that the transition is peaceful, that we are doing quite well. I mean, because we wrote this constitution, we reached this national consensus about the constitution, about what kind of state do we want, etc., etc. You know that the transitional period is nearly over because the next election in 2 months' time will end this transitional period. Three years, that's not too long, and I'm very proud that we did it. This transition has been extremely dangerous, but we did it. The country I think we have all our problems. I'm not going to say that we have mastered our political problems, security problems, and so forth, but I can say that when you compare Tunisia to Libya or to Syria or to other countries, you see that this is a great difference. Now, why the outcome is so different? Why it's the Arab Spring, the same reason, the same reason everywhere. The Arabs are no longer accepting corrupted regime, corrupted states, and so forth. So why the outcome is so different? Once again, because structural reason, because Tunisia is a homogeneous country. We don't have this, this situation like in Iraq or Syria, where you have Christian, Muslims, Shia, etc. Tunisia is a homogeneous country. Tunisia is a middle-class country. Tunisia, I think we have manpower skilled, we have educated population. We're close to Europe also. We have 1 million of our citizens living in Europe. So, and probably also because we don't have oil also. We are not, this is a very important issue also. We have also professional military, not corrupted at all, not this is why we reached this consensus so easily. I think also we have also wise political actors. I used to talk with even my worst enemies, during the most dangerous period of discussion about the constitution and about the situation. So, because of the structural reason, Tunisia is doing quite well, and we have solved our political problems. But now we are facing a lot of challenges, other challenges, mainly security challenges, because Tunisia is not an island. We are in a region getting more and more violent. You know that Libya is now, I'm not using the word chaos because I'm afraid of this word, but really the situation is frightening. Fortunately, we are backed by our Algerian brothers, so we don't have to to work on two frontiers. Just one is enough for us. But I'm very upset by the fact that there's something like blaze, coming from the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and then Libya, and I'm afraid that this could also be very dangerous for us for the next. This is why we are in a hurry, to have this election so we can have a stable country with stable regime, and then we can afford to tackle the other problems, the economic problems, and security problems are both linked. For instance, we do know that one of the high rate of unemployment is one of the reasons that our young people, go to Syria or go to elsewhere, because they don't see any future in Tunisia currently, because we still have this high rate of unemployment and so forth. So the situation is like this. We have to tackle. Politically, I think that Tunisia is on the track. Tunisia is going to be the model. I think we surely are going to build up a democratic state. But we do know that we are targeted by terrorists, because terrorists, they don't want Tunisia to be the success story. Tunisia must be part of the Arab chaos, if I may say so. But because of this structural reason, terrorism is not a real threat. We will be annoyed by the. Why I can say that? Because remember that last year we have two political assassinations whose objective was to stop the process, but it didn't stop it. Yeah. And I think even now, if we have another terrorist attack, it won't stop the process. We are going to go through, and we're going to achieve the political process, and Tunisia would become and will be a stable and democratic state.
Let me just ask you a little bit more about the political process, because...
Well, the political process, we have had a huge discussion about the constitution, because as you know, Tunisia is also a divided society. They have secularists, they have Islamists, and so.
Yes.
And it wasn't easy, to have this constitution accepted by both sides. But we did it. Both sides have accepted this constitution, and now we have the same objective. We do know what kind of society we want. We do know what kind of state we want. So, look what happened in other countries. I'm not going to say. But you see that you have this bipolarization between secularists and the Islamists in Tunisia. We don't have it. In fact, we have it, but not as in other countries like Egypt, where it's really a rift between the two parts of the society. So now our main challenge is not, I'm going to say that our main challenge is not security, even if it's important. Our main challenge is economy. Mm-hmm. If we do not give to our young people, we have about 10%, even more, the rate of unemployment. If we don't give to our young people hope, jobs, etc., I'm afraid that we will be in mess, because people would say, okay, freedom of expression, freedom of association, etc., a nice constitution, that's good, but we want jobs, we want to. And this is why I think the West, if the West wants to invest in democracy, in peace, you must invest in the economic development of Tunisia. Because if we fail, I hope we are not going to fail. I'm doing everything I can. But really, the most dangerous situation for us is not some terrorist attack by ISIS or power, but the fact that the rate of employment still, rise, and this would be extremely dangerous for the. So investing in the economy is investing in peace and democracy. This is the message I'm trying to convey everywhere I go.
So you have a economic transformation going along parallel with the political transformation.
Yes.
You have an economy that was controlled by the state.
Yeah.
With a large role for the ruling family and their friends.
Yeah.
What steps are you taking, and do you plan to take in the future to try to address that high unemployment, which is a global problem, but certainly one that you face?
We do know that we have to do reforms, and that there will probably be a cost. There will be a social cost for this reform, but we would like also that this social cost would be not only on the shoulders of the poor, because our revolution has been the revolution of the poor. So if we don't give them something, well, I'm afraid that we can have a revolution within the revolution. So we have to be very careful. Yes, we have to do this reform, but we have to be very careful because once again, 20% of our population is living under the line of poverty, and this is a huge challenge. So I think that for the next government, it won't be an easy task because yes, we have to do the reforms, but we have to be careful. So I think, don't forget that in Tunisia we have strong unions, and the strong unions would probably oppose anything that could threaten some positions. But in fact, we have bigger. Would you like to comment? She's my legal and economic advisor, and she knows a lot about this question, better than I do. Mabrouka. Do you have a mic?
Hi, I'm Mabrouka Mbarak. I'm a member of the Constituent Assembly.
Stand up so people can see where you are sitting.
Hi. So the Constituent Assembly had two tasks: writing the Constitution, but also working as a parliament. And one of the things that we done right away after the election of that Constituent Assembly was, in parallel of writing the Constitution, was to start this long project to reform completely all laws. And that was a very difficult, I mean, it's still going on. We haven't really completed. Our taxation laws, for example, is not adequate to help the middle class and the poor. We also had to have new budgets that will help these social groups. So, I mean, it's very challenging, but I think that Tunisia is really on the track. Last week, we passed a new law for renewable energy, and we were really excited to see a lot of investors really ready to come to Tunisia and create jobs. We have more laws in the pipeline. Working on the legal framework will really unleash economic projects and help Tunisia to create jobs, and also help Tunisia to become a strong economic partner to the America, Europe, and Africa.
Thank you. So the economic and political are obviously closely linked, and your ability to attract investors and grow the economy depends in large part on being successful in this election process. National Democratic Institute and International Republican Institute were recently there. They gave a generally positive assessment of election preparations, but they warned that partisan misconduct, that was their term, could undermine the process and erode public confidence. And they emphasized the importance of public confidence in the process. Are you fairly confident that the various contending parties, and there are many, I think you said there were more than 30 candidates for president, are they all buying in? Will they all participate? Will they accept the outcome?
Yes, I'm quite sure, because we have had a lot of discussion about the issues, and the most important political parties, they signed a kind of treaty saying that we have to be very careful about the way we are talking about each other and so forth. So there is, a
kind of code of conduct.
Yes, code of honor, and I think everybody would stick to it. It's our first experience in conducting fair elections, and everybody is watching everybody. So I think that we do know that also the whole world is watching us, especially the Arab world, because so we feel the weight of responsibility, and I think we will be. I hope, and I will do everything I can do so we can be, match this. Tunisia is now. Once again, Tunisia is a small country, and we're very much surprised to see how important it's becoming for the Arab world. So we feel the responsibility, and I think we will do everything we can.
So the last time you ran for president, you ended up in jail. You don't think it'll work out that way this time, huh?
Yeah. As I told you, we are having now more than 30 candidates. Is that true? 69. How many? No, not 69 candidates. About 30.
Who met the registration deadline?
Yes, about 30. So, but of course, I will have three opponents, if I may say. But on the other hand, I am very proud of it, because in 1994, when I stand against Ben Ali, after the election, I was sent to jail for 4 months because it was a taboo. And now I'm very proud to see that many simple citizens, can run and nobody would harm them. This is proof that now we have done it. Now we have got a democratic state. Well, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
So when you appeal for American and other investors, where are you asking, where do you think the opportunities lie, and where do you need this kind of capital?
Well, once again, if you want to invest in democracy and peace, once again, you have to invest in economy. This is what I say everywhere. And I do know that, in fact, there are a lot of opportunity, renewable energy, agriculture, power, everything. We need everything. So we can. Yesterday, I have had a meeting with businessmen, and we are talking about. Do you remember? Yes. Could you give some information about?
So you met with the Business Council for International Understanding, and you made a pitch for the kind of investment you'd like to have in Tunisia?
Yes, good morning. I'm the Ambassador Permanent Representative of Tunisia to the United Nations. Welcome all to you. Yes, we have had very interesting meeting there, and we thank them for taking their time to come to our meeting. And we know that for the private, time is money, and we were sure after the meeting that they haven't lost their time with us. They expressed a big interest in Tunisia. Some of them are already there. Others are asking for. They have intention to go there for the other day, and it's legitimate asking for the future of the region more than the future of Tunisia. I think they are confident in our country there. They have expressed a lot of interest in energy sectors and in new renewable as well energy, in agriculture, in tourism, and in some technology, yes, for the services and for technology and for all matter related with TIC, yes, and public service as well. So this was the situation. This is the third one. This is in our tradition to have this kind of meeting. This is the third meeting as well that Mr. President have had with this BCAU, and we have had a lot. We have had governors. We had a lot of chief executive officers. So this was. This is the complementary of that exercise.
Thank you.
I hope I have answered to some of your
Thank you
questions. Thank you.
Mr. President, let me ask you about another issue that's a global one, but is very much part of your political dialogue in Tunisia, and that's the role of women in the political process in society and more generally, and the related issue of violence against women, which is being addressed in many countries.
Well, I think we still have this problem, violence against women. For decades, this problem has been ignored, like also child abuse and neglect. Nobody is talking in Tunisia. I was the first to talk about this issue in the 90s, that we have also an important social problem, child abuse and neglect. So, but as far as women are concerned, we have in the Constitution, it's obvious that we have the equality of gender. Now, I would say that when you compare once again the situation of women in Tunisia and other countries, we see the big difference. Social rights, political rights, equality, and so forth. But this is on the paper, but the society itself, we still have resistance in the society, we still have some problems. And I think we have to tackle this issue very seriously. But for me, don't forget that before being a human rights activist, I'm a professor of public health. So I dealt with the problems of health problems. I know that targeting women is extremely important for improving health of women and children. And my main problem now is that poverty, which is our real enemy in Tunisia, poverty is mainly, I wouldn't say women's problem, but the poorest part of the population is women. So now the problem is not to talk about political rights, because nobody is discussing political rights or equality in Tunisia between women, men and women, but addressing the main problem is poverty, is social and economic rights. So talking about women's rights for me now means talking about social and economic rights, not political, because nobody is discussing this matter. Do you agree, Ms.? Could you elaborate, because you are a woman and also involved in this?
Absolutely. Yes, as I said last year, actually, here at the Council of Foreign Relations, the Constitution, right in the preamble, we actually constitutionalize the equality and the parity. Right in the preamble, we say the citizen men and women are equal. I don't think if we can top that. The parity was a big revolution because it's now in the Constitution. We've done really good in terms of women participation. I think we still have to work on it, but in the Constituent Assembly, we are about 64 women on 217. We have a women caucuses, so this is really working really well. We're finding a lot of dynamics now with civil society. Now the work that we're trying to do is getting social workers and civil society coming to Parliament and talking about these issues of violence against women. I know there is a law that is going to be enacted soon about the subject, and definitely working on improving the laws, constitutionalizing all of this. I think we've done a great job. Participation of women is increasing in Tunisia, especially young women. We see in all political parties they are involved, and that's a great thing. We should continue that. And now it's working with the social workers, and the Ministry of Women Affairs and Family is doing a great job, and we hope to continue. Thanks.
So, Mr. President, what are some key things that can be done to address the poverty of women, and in general this 20% that's poor in Tunisia?
We have a special program. Could you elaborate on this special program we have?
I'm Tarek Kahlaoui. I'm the director of the Tunisian Institute for Strategic Studies. The president knows, but he wants just to us to talk. So yeah, we have this project on poverty, which is going to be supported by financement, including by foreign donors, and it's addressing specifically the idea of promoting small businesses, especially with young people, and it's gonna start. And this is not necessarily one of the prerogatives of the president, but he's pushing for this, and he has been pushing for this now for at least 2 years. And finally, we established this program that we hope is going to continue regardless of who's going to be president and what kind of government we're going to have after these elections, which are going to be basically in the next 2 months. Thank you.
And before we open it up to the audience, one question on the topic you mentioned about Tunisia is not an island, and you're impacted not only by your neighbors, Algeria and Libya, but by the region in which you're located, and where the violence and the conflict has increased in recent days. Are you concerned that this is going to impact the electoral process, and what other impact is it having on Tunisia?
Well, the next 20 or 60 days would probably be very dangerous for us, because we are ready to face any threat. We are waiting with some anxiety that we could have political assassination or any kind of attacks. But once again, this won't derail the train, because Tunisia is on the track and everybody is ready for this. I hope it won't happen, but we are ready. Psychologically, we are ready. We do know that we are targeted by the terrorists, and their objective, once again, is to stop the process. What I'm afraid of is the situation in Libya, because there, Libya is extremely important for us, for Tunisian. If Libya was a stable state, we would have probably resolved some of our economic problem. But now, on the contrary, Libya is now a burden on our shoulders, because we have 2 million refugees, 2 million Libyan living in Tunisia, and 2 million, that means on 10 million Tunisian, that's too much.
Yes.
You know, but so not only Libya didn't help us to solve our problems, economic problems, but we have to solve the economic problems of Libyans. So the situation is extremely difficult, and we are afraid if there are more violence in Libya, then we could have 2 other millions, and then Tunisia would be absolutely incapable to tackle this kind of problem. So this is why we work very hard, you know, to politically to tell the Libyan, look, we have done something. You can do also, because reaching the consensus, of course, it's difficult. Of course, it takes time, but it's much more interesting than, you know, fighting against each other, and you do know that you're not going to reach any solution. The problem is that the Libyans, you know, are torn between 2 models, the Tunisian models and the other models, you know, where bipolarization and, you know, and I'm afraid that for the moment, I hope that the Tunisian model would prevail, but otherwise Libya really would become a new Somalia, and this is not acceptable for us. This is why we are working very closely with our Algerian brothers, our Algerian neighbors, because we have the same opinion, we have the same objectives, that to stop this chaos coming from the Middle East as far as possible, you know. Fortunately, the Maghreb region itself is a stable region. Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, and Tunisia, we are trying now once again to talk about the Maghreb, the Union of the Maghreb, because this region could be the most stable part in the Arab world. I hope that the situation would improve in Egypt. That I have heard that Mr. Sisi was talking about, possibly about having, I wouldn't say reconciliation or something, but I hope that in Egypt, my opinion is that there is no other solution than to talk with your enemies and to try to find a solution, a political solution. What's happening in Syria and Iraq is quite frightening, because fighting ISIS, you know, without addressing the roots of the problem, seems to me, as a physician, you know, is just to take out the symptoms and not go to cure the disease.
Thank you. All right, we're going to invite members of we're going to invite members present to join the conversation. Or it's a reminder that this session is on the record. Please wait for the microphone, stand and state your name and a question in a concise manner, please. I'll start in front here.
Michael Gordon, New York Times. Sir, you mentioned the ISIS problem and people who've come from your country to join the jihad in Iraq and Syria. Do you know how many Tunisians have volunteered to do that? Why did they do that? Have any returned to your country, and has that been a problem for you? And do you think President Obama did the right thing last night by carrying out airstrikes against ISIS in Syria?
Well, I don't know exactly how many Tunisians are there, but what we do know that we are preventing young people to go to Syria. We are doing everything we can do, you know, to prevent them from leaving Tunisia. When we think that this guy is probably going to, we stop him, even if sometimes it's not quite legal. I asked myself, the Turkish government many times, you know, to be very careful with Tunisians coming, because some of them, you know, go to Syria through Turkey. So we do everything we can, you know, to prevent young Tunisians to go there. But the question is why we have so many young people going there. But it's the same question you have to ask in France, in Britain, in a lot of countries. You have the same phenomena. So. Well, the reason is obvious. Young people in Tunisia with no jobs, with they don't see their future. Propaganda also, probably the romance of being a jihadist, and a lot of reasons. But we are very much, careful about people coming back from Syria, and we are watching very closely everybody coming from having been in Syria. About President Obama's decision, yes, I think ISIS is probably the most important threat, not only to it's. Don't forget that 99% of the victims of ISIS are Muslims and Arabs. Of course, I do condemn very strongly what happened to the two American citizens, but please don't forget that 99% of the victims of ISIS are Arabs and Muslims. I must say that I also condemn I'm very ashamed as a Muslim for what has been done to our Christian brothers, because Christians in Iraq are really Arabs, they are citizens, and what happened to them is extremely unacceptable. Of course, I can understand that we have to solve this, to tackle this problem by military means, but once again, we have to address the roots of the problem. ISIS is the price we are paying for more than 50 years of, wrong politics, corruption, repression, etc., etc. We are paying now the price. And if we want to tackle the real problem, we have to go and to go to the roots of the problems. Once again, means, it's. I think believing that we can battle ISIS only with weapons, it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense. But the problem is that we have to do it right now, and that if we want to begin now the social, economic, political reform, etc., that would take a lot of time. 10 years, then you will have the outcome. 10 years, 20 years, and then we don't have. So you have, to conduct both politics, treating the symptoms by military means, but also addressing as soon as possible the roots of the problem. That means that the United States should make all the pressure it can, with many Arab regimes to do the reform, because otherwise you will have the same phenomenon that happens in Libya. A lot of governments in the Arab world still believe that, what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Libya, etc., would not happen in our own country, but I think it's not true.
We go to the back here. It's hard to see. It's a woman at this okay, yeah, go ahead. And then you're next here.
Paul Tierney, Development Capital. It would make it a lot easier for those of us who'd like to increase our financial commitments to Tunisia if there was a broader and deeper publicly traded market. I'm wondering what your plans are for developing the capital markets in Tunisia, and especially with all the holdings of the Ben Ali family that were taken over by the government and not yet distributed. Are you planning to offer those on the public market and make ownership of companies in Tunisia more widespread?
Mabrouk, I believe.
So one of the biggest challenges was also to improve the business environment in Tunisia, of course, crippled by cronyism and we know corruption. So this is a difficult task. We've already started with implementing better processes, reducing red tape. It's an ongoing process. Again, having laws, access to information to citizen and resident is really important. Making sure that that all the processes between investors and the state is transparent and fair. Unfortunately, to answer the question about the assets, it's a very difficult task to get the assets back. It's not as easy, and a lot of countries that went through trying to get the assets back, it takes years because of the different laws. And we're not the only one. And actually, if we look at some of the reports of the World Bank, we see that to get back the assets, it takes at least 10 years, unless you get something past the UN. So again, maybe that can be a message. If you want to help us to help Tunisia is trying to have a motion at the UN, that actually speed up the process to get all the assets back. But again, we definitely are working into making the administration more transparent and with more governance. We constitutionalize the decentralization, and we're giving a lot more power to local communities expertise. And this is an ongoing process, but we're really going into the right direction. So we're definitely seeing improvement and a better environment. And again, this is going to improve. Thank you.
Right here.
Hi, good morning. Sarah Lee Whitson from Human Rights Watch. First, just to commend Tunisia on its constitution and more importantly for its constitution drafting process, which I think is a model for the region that sadly has not been copied by other states. What concerns us now is the continued impunity of the security forces, not only for the recent political assassinations that the government has failed to prosecute, but also for the failure to prosecute any senior level government officials for the killings of protesters under the prior government. How can you explain Tunisia's continued failure to seriously prosecute in the chain of command killings by security forces?
Well, I wouldn't talk about, say, failure. I think, as I told you, we have had to face a lot of problems, mainly security problems, of course, but not only. If you want, we have reached this consensus about, first of all, let's try to unite Tunisian. Let's try to begin with this independent judiciary and transitional justice. And let's the whole task to the transitional justice, and this is what we're working on. So I'm sure that we are. It's very difficult to explain. I must be frank with you. We have to be very careful both with the political situation, because we badly need our security forces. But on the other hand, we have also to accept that some massive violation. I have been victim of this violation by security forces. But when you are battling, when you are fighting against terrorists, you have also to take this in account. It's a very difficult decision to make. You have to accept that some people, have been violating the rights of Tunisian. It's very difficult to say, okay, this is not the most important thing now. For the moment, I have to be very careful with the security forces. I have to encourage them because I badly need them in my fight against. So as you see, I have been a human rights activist, and I'm still a human rights activist. I do know how you think and how I think in this matter. But sometimes also when you have to take political decision, it's much more complex. So please try to understand me. I'm not betraying my ideals. I'm just saying that in some conditions, in some circumstances, you have to be very careful about that.
And does that apply to the 2013 assassinations, the failure, the lack of prosecution, or?
It's not lack of prosecution. We are waiting for the transitional justice. We want this transitional justice to tackle the issue, and to tackle it very, very smoothly and very carefully, because we want justice, and we want also our security forces to work, because we badly need them. And otherwise, we could have strikes, and then you are in a mess. This is reality. This is how things work. It's not only a matter of on paper, on ideas. I understand you, but you have to understand me also.
Okay. Right here.
Maurice Templesman, Leon Templesman and Son. Obviously, when the Arab Spring came about, there was a great deal of hope, and we're certainly delighted to see that, by example, Tunisia is with all the difficulties, on a successful route. Simply the way you handle your collaborators was also rather interesting, and so we commend you on that. Many of us who are involved in the process of democratization, I happen to be on the board of the National Democratic Institute and chair the African Subcommittee, are going through a debate now. And the debate is really that, in a sense, change has to come from within. Political changes are very important, but at the end, there's a cultural basis that underlies the process of democracy at this point. And that debate is going to be very important on the role that we as a country institutions can play in this process. What advice would you give us? Are there societies that are simply not ready for democracy? And if so, how does one deal with that? How does the Arab world deal with that? I'd love to hear your thinking on that particular subject.
Well, you're right when you talk about the cultural basis of democracy, because democracy is not just a matter of elections, or I think that it's a matter of accepting the other, accepting that you have to share the country, you have to share power, you have to share everything, because in our for centuries, you know, it's who would dominate the situation, who would dominate the country. How would I say that? Allez-y, expliquez ce que je veux dire.
If I may answer the question, and I did work as an MP with the National Democratic Institute, and I thank them for helping coming in Tunisia. I think one of the important things, I don't think we should say that people are not ready for democracy. They're ready, but we need to unleash their potential by education, but having access to information and connectivity that will help the people to really express their democratic aspiration. I do believe that people are born to want democracy. And for a long time, what dominated us as a people was a dictatorship, and not having access to information was really difficult. For example, you go to the library and get books. All of this helped to maintain that dictatorship. So really invest in education, getting access to books online, for example, and books. Connectivity is really important. The debate, having young people participating in debate, in having, you know, doing critical analysis and all that. This really helped, I think, any society, any community to express the aspiration of democracy. So if I have advice, is really investing in education and connectivity and making sure that all societies are open and transparent and work on the basis of good governance. Thank you.
In fact, the main problem in our society, I would like to comment on that. Main problem in our society is, as I told you, it's a divided society. Part of it is still deeply involved in the old heritage, you know, Islam and so forth. And then the other part of the society is westernized. So our main problem in our societies, in Tunisia and any Arab society, is how to reconcile between Islam and the new values we got from the West. And we have had a discussion about this issue has been discussed for years, and I would say even for decades. And I think in Tunisia, this is why Tunisia is so original, so important. In Tunisia, we reached this consensus about how to reconcile between Islam and democracy. And this debate was a cultural debate before being a political debate. I have a discussion with Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, which is the head of the party Nahda. For years we have discussed it. But our main objective was to say, hey, we don't agree about who has the truth, who hasn't. But we have to agree that we Tunisians are divided and we have to live together. So how can we construct together a new ideology? It's really, we have to invent a new ideology. And we did it, I think, myself and Rashid Ghannouchi and some other Arab intellectuals, mainly Tunisian intellectuals, we tried to really invent a new ideology that everybody feel free to say, that's my ideology. And our constitution, our constitution is not just a book of laws and so principles. It is really this image we have tried, this ideology we have tried to build together, so we can give our population the belief that they really belong to the same people, and they have something, some values in common. And this was, once again, cultural and I would say even ethical debate before being political. And this is why after because we have achieved it, because we have had this discussion, this huge discussion, then we could have this, this government, this troika government between secularists and Islamists.
Right here.
Jeff Laurenti. Mr. President, you twice made reference to being backed by our Algerian brothers, and you noted that the Maghreb is a region of stability. We wake up this morning to news accounts of a Frenchman arriving in Algeria 2 days ago, and the next day kidnapped by a group that declares itself affiliated with Daesh, with ISIL. How secure Iraq is Algeria in the region? How would you assess its progress without the uprisings of 2011 at democratic evolution? And what kind of backing do you actually get from Algeria in navigating your way through these currents? I mean, if Tunisia has Salafist problems, Algeria had a 10-year bloody insurgency.
Mm-hmm.
How stable really is Algeria?
Well, we have a very good relationship with Algeria. Once again, if we didn't have this kind of relationship, really we would have been a mess. We are backed economically. Algeria is helping Tunisia economically. We are backed militarily. We share information, intelligence with our Algerian brothers and so forth. I think that Algeria is a stable country, and I hope it will remain a stable country, because otherwise really it will be a catastrophe if we do have a new region of instability. I think that Algerian and Moroccan also are, understood what happened in the Arab world, and I think there are some reforms on the track. But once again, we badly need this cooperation with Algeria. Otherwise, we cannot afford to have problems on both frontiers, on the two frontiers.
Okay, I'm getting the word that the President has a very busy schedule and needs to be leaving very soon. We can take one more question if you have one. Here's one right here.
Thank you. It's Mark Landler with the New York Times. Mr. President, you were itemizing all the ways that Tunisia is different from some of its neighbors at the beginning of your remarks. And one other difference is that the United States doesn't have a deep engagement with Tunisia, certainly militarily. And I wonder whether, to some extent, you feel that that has also spared you some of the division and chaos and polarization that you alluded to.
Maybe, but now we are asking for more involvement, of course not military, but more in helping and supporting the economy of Tunisia, because I have had a very interesting discussion with the Vice President Joe Biden, and even with President Obama, and I believe that they know that supporting Tunisia is really investing in peace and democracy in the whole region. And I'm sure that we're going to have more and more involvement from the United States in the democratic process in Tunisia. Once again, Tunisia is a small country, small market, but its influence is much more important, because for the whole Arab world, it could be the model. And this is why we have to succeed. I always say that we don't have the choice. We have to succeed or to succeed. This is my slogan for the electoral campaign.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank you for taking time to be here. Once again, this was an on-the-record session, and thank you all for participating.